Now then, a question for you. Could their success in Richmond be the first of many election upsets for the Conservative Party? Former Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg has said that the 48% of the UK who voted for Remain feel airbrushed out of the equation and that Richmond represents the beginning of a backlash. Mr Clegg joins me now from central London. A very good morning to you, Mr Clegg. So is it a case of going back to your constituencies and preparing for government?
Well, it's certainly go back to your constituencies and prepare for winning again, which is a nice feeling for a party that's been pretty sort of, battered and bruised in recent years because of the decline in our fortunes particularly in the general election last year. And of course, it's great not only that we're winning in Richmond, but of course that we pulled off that remarkable result, if not quite winning, in Witney. And by the way, in lots and lots of local by-elections up and down the country. In my neck of the woods in Sheffield, just a few weeks ago, we won there was a huge swing from Labour to the Liberal Democrats interestingly, an area that had voted for BREXIT. So it's in many different areas of the country where the Liberal Democrat fortunes appear to be starting to turn a corner.
And so do you think it runs counter to a bit of an argument, a bit of a discussion we're having today about the disconnection, we all know about that, in so many places with politics, and the right being the answer? Perhaps we might see that in Austria, maybe in Italy, maybe in France. Do you still feel, certainly in the UK, there is the centre ground to go for?
Well, I think interestingly, of course, what was revealed in Richmond, and I suspect might even be confirmed in the by-election in Lincolnshire next week, is that increasingly Brexit is becoming the organising principle around which elections are fought and around which parties have to sort of decide how they line up. And on that, of course, what is intriguing is it's the two parties with the clearest message for or against Europe, namely the LibDems and UKIP, who stand to benefit from that, while the two mainstream establishment parties, Labour and the Conservatives, are getting themselves into an ever greater pickle as they can't really decide what they want and what they believe. And that's the intriguing thing, is that I think when politics increasingly moves from the old sort of right-left distinction that many of us sort of grew up with, high tax, low tax, the state versus the market, it's now being replaced with a politics about, do you believe in openness or closing our country? And on that, the Liberal Democrats have a very unambiguous view, not universally popular, but certainly very popular amongst certain parts of the population, that we should remain an open and tolerant country.
So, are the political clouds beginning to go into ferment here? You talk about a realignment, and we saw there a progressive alliance in Richmond, with in particular the Greens and others supporting the Lib Dems there. Now, the quote I read to you originally, you recognise, from David Steele, was from an alliance back in 1981, the SDP Liberal Alliance. Not the same, but could we be seeing something like that begin to start?
Well, the interesting thing is, of course, voters, people, not politicians, but people just in the ballot box, are already voting, by way of those alliances. Clearly, for instance, lots of Labour voters in Richmond decided to vote for the Liberal Democrats rather than their own candidate. I mean, they got fewer votes than they actually have members in Richmond. So, voters are relatively kind of unfussy about the idea that you've got to sometimes make choices in order to get the best of what you want. If not, it's exactly all of what you want. And I think that as the years progress, and particularly if this government appears to be or continues to be as clueless as they appear to be on Brexit, I think there will be a need for parties and voters of different parties, non-Conservative parties, to kind of tacitly or otherwise work together in order to provide the scrutiny and challenge which the Conservative Party needs, given that certainly Jeremy Corbyn, on left to his own devices, is not really minded to play the role of a principal party leader of opposition. So I do think there is a scope for people to relinquish their traditional tribal loyalties in order to bring some balance to British politics.
Sorry, Mr Clegg, getting all excited. Spell it out then. So the Lib Dems at a general election might not stand in seats where other progressives have a better chance.
No, I'm not actually talking about, and nor would it be, at least not any longer, my decision to take. But I'm not talking about, standing candidates down. Though, as you say, that is becoming increasingly familiar to people. It wasn't just the Greens who stood down in Richmond. Of course, very significantly, it was UKIP and the Conservatives who stood down for Zach Goldsmith. So it's not just on the centre-left where that appears to be happening more. It's also on the other side of the political equation. But what I do think will be important is, of course, to explain to voters, for instance, if you're in a Conservative Liberal Democrat constituency in the southwest of the country, and you know that either the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives are going to win, of course we will be saying to Green voters and Labour voters, look, we understand that you are a Green and a Labour person at heart, but surely it's better to have a Liberal Democrat who believes in our future in Europe and so on, rather than this hardline Brexiteer who presently represents you. I think you will see a lot more of that, which we saw in Richmond. You will see a lot more of that as Brexit continues to loom over the British political scene.
There's another man I was talking to very recently saying more or less the same thing as you, certainly about the centre ground and the view on Brexit. Tony Blair, two of you could get together like some kind of noughties political tribute band.
I wouldn't put it like that. But listen, the interesting thing about this Brexit sort of issue, the way it divides people, is, of course, yes, you get unfamiliar foes, but you also get rather unfamiliar alliances. And of course, whilst Tony Blair's from the Labour Party, I'm from the Liberal Democrats, he and I disagree on different things. Actually, what I've heard him say about the future of our country, about what is at stake for the future of the United Kingdom, I agree with pretty well everything he has said, and I've certainly agreed with him when he has been brave enough to say, look, of course we should keep an open mind. What happened on the 23rd of June is clearly the mandate which this government needs to follow, but what if people change their mind in the years ahead? What if they decide over time that this isn't such a good idea, and that after all, now that when they see what Brexit means in practice, it doesn't look as attractive as it sounded in theory? I think he's quite right to say that, of course, as a country, we should keep an open mind, because that's what we owe to our children and our grandchildren. So on that issue, at least, I actually agree entirely with what he's been saying.
I'm sure he's watching right now and saying, I agree with Nick. Oh, someone else said that. Nick Clegg, thank you very much indeed. Watch this space.
Thank you. You didn't, frankly, have the balls to put country before party.